high on a hill.
Go to your home page and look along the top of the phone. You'll see a whole bunch of tiny little boxes up there. You see those up there?
Yeah.
Up on top there? You don't have any. You're okay. You got a few.
That's
You're not going to see them on that phone there.
I got a ton of them.
Yeah. So what are those? What the heck are those? Those are messages. Okay? If you have them and you take your phone and you swipe down from the top, you'll see the messages.
Oh,
See
that's
that?
very clever, yeah.
Yeah. And so do you want to read those or not? Well, I have one saying there's a PC users group from 6 and 8 on today. Maybe I better go to that. And then there's Android systems telling me that SmartThings is using my battery, and so what? And Wave Cloud Phone is active. Okay, that's good to know. So and then below them there's one more that I'm connected to the Wi-Fi in here. But then there's something that says notification settings. You see that way at the bottom? And then in clear, well, you can imagine what clear does. It's going to clear all of those up. Okay, so if you press clear, it will clear them all. So they'll all go away.
Do all of those slow down your phone?
Yeah, that's not the problem. They mostly slow down your mind. It's not so much a problem with the phone at this point because
Overloading your brain?
but this is so minute, the amount of energy that it's using and processing power. Because think about it this way, they're just posting once and then they're basically going away. Okay, they don't have to post again. So it's a one-time shot. And so it's not constantly draining your system. But if you clear it, it should take them all, or most of them away. But then you'll also notice down here, on mine it says notification settings, and I can click on there, and it brings up all my applications eventually. And I can tell whether to show notifications or not to show notifications. Okay, and I can go through each application. You can see on my phone I've turned them all off, except for one. So my calendar is still sending me notifications. Okay. So has everybody pretty much got to that notification page? If you haven't found it, you can also get there by going down from the top, and this is more for Android phones, because on Apple phones you'd have to go to the settings application. Yeah.
It's all up, okay?
Yeah, okay.
That's what you said.
Yeah. If you go down to the top here and you click on the little thing that looks like, you tap on the little thing that looks like a gear, that takes you to your settings application. And the third one down on my phone is notifications, which brings me back to the same page where I was before. And you can tell it what to send notifications, what not to send you notifications. And every new application, when you install it on your phone that can send a notification, will automatically turn itself on, okay, when you install it. So you have to physically go into that application and turn it off, okay? But basically it's just a matter of, just tapping a button. You just tap that one, now it's on, and then you can tap it and they go off. All apps. That's nice to give you one for all apps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what those little things are that run across the top of the phone. Now, if you have an iPhone, you would have to go to the settings application, and then you'd have to go to the actual.
Oh, here, here's my finger.
Okay.
What's that?
So you go to your settings, and then there's notifications right there.
Mm-hmm.
And you just tap on notifications, and then you can tell which ones are on, which ones are off, and you can set it so that you're not constantly bugged by the things that you want. You get bugged by the things you want to get bugged by, and that's why notifications are there. But some things you just don't care, okay? So go ahead and turn them off. But that way you won't get overloaded, you won't get bombarded with notifications. That's a good tip. I don't think you get as many on a Kindle as you would on an iPhone or an Android phone. Okay, so let's go back to the list here. So when we talk about iTunes on an Apple device, what are we talking about? We're talking about how we manage our music. Okay, that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, it's tunes, kind of think of music. So that's, but there are other things you can do with iTunes as well. But for this particular session, we're going to talk about iTunes are basically the way we manage music on our devices. If you want to take music down from the internet, from Apple, you would download it from the iTunes store, okay? And you would be able to play it on your device or any other device. You can, if you bought it under your Apple ID, you can play it on any other device that has a music program that can recognize your Apple ID. The big drawback about if you want to actually put it on your phone so it stays there permanently, you need to download your music through the iTunes application to your phone and then manage it from there. Another thing you need to do through iTunes as well, if you want to back up your Apple phone to your computer, you have to do it through iTunes. There's no other way to do it. Now there's another way that you can do it over Wi-Fi, but you still have to do it through the iTunes, or you can back it up to the cloud. Okay? Now when we talk about the cloud and Apple's, what are we talking about? We're talking about iCloud. Right? iCloud is right here on the list up over there. Let's see what it says about iCloud. So this tells us about the difference between iCloud and iCloud Drive, and there is a difference. iCloud is like the name for the whole application. iCloud Drive is basically the storage piece of the iCloud program. But anyway, the iCloud icon looks like this, iCloud Drive. iCloud, though, is you connect with what kind of ID to iCloud? Your Apple ID. Your Apple ID. And that allows you access to get to basically all the stuff you want to save in the cloud on Apple. Let's see. How did I get there? Okay, so if you look straight across from iCloud, what do you see over here? Google Drive. So Google Drive would be the equivalent on the Android device side or the Google side that you'd see on the Apple. So the two, it's just basically a storage area in the cloud, okay? And you can keep your pictures there, and you can keep your data there, your text there, you can keep your music there, all kinds of stuff you can keep there. So what I'm trying to show here is that pretty much everything has an equivalent, okay? Apple goes out of its way to keep their users friendly. Every user on an iPhone or an iPad is not an administrator, they're just a user. Whereas with the Android device, you have the choice of whether you want to be an administrator or a user. Greater power, greater chance you can destroy something. Okay? It's easier to go from here to the Apple side than it is to go from the Apple side to the Android side, because you actually have a lot more opportunity to do things on the Android side. That doesn't mean you can't do everything you need to do on the Apple side. Don't get me wrong, I'm not short selling them. I'm just saying that you're safer over here. we talked about in the last session about viruses and things like that. Probably a little bit more secure until we get tomorrow's newspaper that says Apple's just been hacked and whatever. So I have to be careful what I say here. Okay. A big thing on these devices is the phone. Okay? So what does a phone do on an Android phone and a Apple phone? Allows you to make phone calls. Pretty good, huh? I thought I'd put that in there just because I could. Yeah. So we have, and on the Android phone it's called phone, and on the Apple phone it's called phone. So they're pretty much equivalent there. Now photos. Photos are kind of a big deal. People, back in the good old days, we used to have a drawer full of Kodak photos. In fact, we probably still do. And we've probably been promising ourselves for the last 20 years that we were going to get them all organized and indexed, or take digital pictures of them or something before they fade away. But anyway, people get really attached to their photos, and on the Android side, where you store your photos is called the gallery. So if you're on your iPhone and you take a picture, where does that picture get stored? In what application? Photos. If you're on an Android phone and you take a picture, where does that picture get stored? It's stored in the gallery. Okay. So basically, it's the same thing. You can tell your Android phone or your iCloud phone, your Apple phone, when you take a picture, you can tell it to save it in the cloud as well as on your phone, or just save it in the cloud. So there's lots of different ways you can do that. What's the advantage of saving something in the cloud?
You don't need something.
More storage.
You can get to it from any device, from anywhere in the world.
That's true.
So if you jump on an airplane and you go to Japan tomorrow and you forget your phone, but there was a picture on it that you really needed to see, you can log on from any computer that connects to the internet to your iCloud account, look at your pictures, and there it is. Okay, because it's in the cloud. But if you left your device at home, if you don't send it to the cloud, you won't be able to look at that picture. So that's one thing. Another is, so we get 5 gigabytes of free storage with Apple. And you can store a lot of stuff, a lot of pictures, if you organize them well. You can even back up your phone there and use the 5 gigabytes. But a lot of people have a lot more than 5 gigabytes. Okay? So Apple will sell you 50 gigabytes of storage space for 99 cents a month. So $12 a year, okay? It's actually a pretty decent deal if you consider the fact that they're backing everything up and they're responsible for it and things like that. So it's something you might want to look into. On the Google side, if you send things into the cloud, they give you 15 gigabytes of free storage space, or unlimited storage space for your photos if you allow them to compress them into a little bit smaller size. So you can keep, and that's for free. Okay? If they give you 15 gigabytes, when you first buy a device, you're going to get a little notification that get this offer now for 100 gigabytes of storage on Google Drive for 1 year. Well, guess what happens after a year? You start paying for that 100 gigabytes of space. So it's not always a good idea to do it just because it's free. But it is a good way to store documents and things that you want to be able to work with in the cloud. Okay. When we're talking about a Chromebook here, which is also uses Linux, we call it similar. It can actually run Android applications and things like that. It's a really good way to store data in the cloud because you only have a little bit of storage space on the device here itself, but you can store a lot in the cloud. and get to it from anywhere else. So the cloud can really be a boon for people who like to get around and travel and things like that. The disadvantage of the cloud is what? If your internet goes down, well, you can't get to any of your stuff. Okay? So, can you get to the cloud from a cellular connection on any of these phones? Sure, why not? As long as you can connect a browser to the internet, you can get your stuff in the cloud. Okay? Is anyone confused about the cloud? Have any questions about the cloud? Yes.
How do you get the information out of the cloud?
Basically, so here I have a little drive that plugs into my computer. Okay? When I pull this out, how do I get that information again? I plug it back in. So if I'm working with the cloud and I want to get information from the cloud, I connect to the cloud over the internet. When I'm done, I disconnect. When I want to get my stuff again, I reconnect. I'll go to like apple.com or google.com and I'll connect to the cloud and I'll reconnect to it. It's just like plugging another disk drive in your computer. So you can connect to it and you can disconnect from it. In computer terms, we call it mounting and unmounting from a storage device, whatever. Okay? Yes?
You have, with Google Google Drive.
Google Drive.
You have 15 gigabytes.
Right.
Right in the cloud. They'll give you that.
Right.
Or you can buy more.
Right.
How do you put things in the cloud instead of in your folders or in your documents?
Well, just like I said before, you connect to, let's look on here.
You have to have a Google account, right?
Yeah, well, when you have Chrome, you have a Chrome account, you have a
Right.
Gmail account.
Right.
I have Chrome.
So it's a Gmail account. And so, and let me just expand this out here. So everything up here where it says my files are files that are stored on my computer. So they're things that are stored on here.
Right.
Okay, I can take a file that's here or a folder and I can move it into Google Drive and put it here. So now it's going to live on the internet in the cloud in Google Drive and I can move things back and forth because I am connected through an application called Google Drive. Okay, I have to install Google Drive on my Android phone, an Apple phone, an iPad, an Android tablet, a Chromebook, a Windows PC. I can use any of those, a Mac, I can use any of those devices. When I install Google Drive and sign in with my Gmail account, I can get to any of these files and manipulate them any way I want. Just like a little memory stick that plugs into your computer. It's just like another drive that's attached to your computer. You can move things back and forth. You can rename them. You can edit them. You can redistribute them. You can make copies of them. You can move them. There's all sorts of things. And I just want to say, I think that the next session we have, we need to start talking about file systems because they're real confusing to the novice because it's understanding a hierarchical system and it really doesn't make any sense the first few times you look at it. But once you understand how a file system works on one device, you'll understand how it works on the next device and the next device. So it's really worthwhile learning it on one, and I think we're going to learn it using Windows 10.
Well, I was trying to find the difference between Google Drive and Google One.
I don't know what Google One is.
One Google Drive and OneDrive.
OneDrive.
Oh, OneDrive.
Yeah, so OneDrive is the Microsoft cloud.
And Google Drive.
It's the Google cloud.
They're both clouds.
They're two clouds.
They're two computers. One sits inside a data center at Microsoft. That's your OneDrive.
Well, the OneDrive wanted me to pay for that.
Right, well, they want you to pay for additional storage.
Yeah, right. And Google, and then on my wife's computer, keeps popping up and saying, you need to install or open an account for Google Drive
Right.
to make your computer more safe.
Well, the reason they're doing, Microsoft is doing that now because what they're basically doing is they're trying to protect people from ransomware.
Right.
So what does ransomware do?
So then launch your computer and says, pay me money or we'll do.
No, it doesn't do anything like
I
that.
thought it did.
Nope. Nope. Ransomware gets onto your computer
Right.
and it encrypts all your files
Right.
and it changes the names of your file. Your computer still works just fine, just can't get to anything or do anything. Hasn't locked it.
Okay.
So what ransomware is they're gonna charge you ransom to give you the key to unlock all your files. Okay? And that's why it's called ransomware,
Right.
because they're holding you ransom
Yeah,
to
right.
pay it. Now, if those are really important files and they're worth the $500, you'll pay it, and maybe the key to unlock it will work, maybe it won't. Okay? Or if you were smart and you backed up all your important files to the Microsoft Cloud or the Google Cloud or whatever, or Carbonite or iDrive or another online backup program, you can just kind of laugh at those ransomware people and just download the files again onto your computer and they're all set and ready to go.
Yeah.
So that's why they have that. They're giving you a space to keep your files in the cloud in an area that's not easily connected to. For example, if you have in a PC, if you looked at this disk drive right here, instead of just saying, let's see what it's called on here. Instead of just being called Lexar, because it's a Lexar drive there, it would be called something like F drive. Say F:, and then Lexar. It's a logical drive. Okay? So, when ransomware comes in, it looks for A drive, B drive, C drive, D drive, E drive, F drive, G drive, and on and on and on. And then it will connect to those drives and it will encrypt all the files. It can't easily do that in the cloud unless you're actually logged onto the cloud at the time. And it still has to jump through some hoops to mess up the stuff that you have in the cloud. And that's why Microsoft and Google and those other companies that have cloud servers, what are some other cloud companies? Amazon has its own cloud. I'm trying to think of the
Dropbox.
Dropbox is kind of the granddaddy of the cloud stuff. Everyone's kind of, but they all look the same. I mean, they all have, you have a root directory and you have subdirectories, and under the subdirectories you have files and things like that. They all look the same, and that's what we need to talk about in file systems, because once you recognize how that works, then all of a sudden, it makes everything make sense. But until we get there, when you look at this, it's not going to make as much sense as if we learn how to go down the yellow brick road. You'll notice in Windows all the little folders and things are yellow. We're going to be like Dorothy, and we're going to go down the yellow brick road, okay, and learn how to get down into our files and understand how it all works together.
It's probably not unique in this situation, but I've got files and things I've saved all over in my computer.
No, you're the only one.
Well, that's good, that's because I'm unique.
No, everybody has that problem.
Yeah.
See, my problem is, and I guarantee you that Steve has the same problem, and so does Joe, we had to learn how to use file systems in order to do our work.
You didn't have that, you weren't born like this? Yeah.
No, we had to learn how to use file systems, and basically people counted on us to really understand it. So we are going to impart our knowledge onto the rest of the crew if we can. Some people will get it and some people won't,
That's probably true.
but some people will get it better than others. Okay, so let's go back to our, so did that answer your question a little bit about connecting? So OneDrive is a Microsoft cloud. What is the cloud? The cloud is basically a computer or group of computers sitting in a data center that responds to your username and password on Microsoft. The Apple cloud is a computer or set of computers sitting in Cupertino or somewhere else in the data center, or it could be distributed in multiple places, that knows how to respond to your username, your Apple ID, and your password. The Google Cloud is a computer or set of computers sitting along the Columbia River somewhere where electricity is cheap and they could have big data centers. And basically, they're computers that know how to respond to your Gmail account address and things like that. So that's how the cloud works. It attaches just like another disk drive to your computer. You need to mount it, and you need to unmount it when you're done with it. And on more sophisticated systems, it does it and you don't even know it's doing it. Okay? So let's continue. Oops, I did the wrong one. Let's go back to... Okay. So one of my favorite things to do these days, I love listening to podcasts. Does anyone else listen to podcasts? Well, you don't know what you're missing. So does anyone not know what a podcast is? So a podcast is basically, it's like a radio show. Okay, they're usually between 10 minutes and an hour long. Okay, like every morning, the New York Times puts one on called The Daily, and it's the news for the day, things like that. And it's everything from power sports to religion to whatever subject you can think of, comedy, raunchy humor, whatever you want. It's on the internet and it's on podcasts. And you use something called a podcast player to go out and pick the ones you want to listen to, because there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there. You can pick the ones you want. You can subscribe to them, and then when you refresh it, you can get the latest podcasts, or you can listen to old ones. So Apple Podcasts is the podcast application on Apple devices, and Google Podcasts is the application for Android devices. Of course, neither one of them is installed when you get the device. You have to go out to the Play Store or the Apple Store and install it on your device. But podcasts are a wonderful way of listening to people. I listen to podcasts when I ride my bike and when I take walks, and when I wake up at 3 in the morning and I want to fall asleep again, I put on something really boring and I'm gone. But podcasts are really, really cool. If you've never listened to it, it's worth exploring. They've been around for the last 20 years, so it's really nothing new. They're very addicting. So if you have an addictive personality, you'll be listening to podcasts every day.
How much does it cost?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It's free.
Oh.
Yeah, the podcast, I'm sure there are possibly some podcasts out, like, for example, everyone's heard of TED Talks.
Yeah.
So TED Talks has like maybe 10 different podcasts that they do, because they have all kinds of TED and technology, entertainment, and design. I think of it is. Yeah. So and NPR News. I don't know if you listen to NPR or BBC. They have multiple podcasts by the any political affiliation. If you can go down a whole list of people who have podcasts and things like that. But anyway, you should check it out. Just type in your browser podcast, or go to Wikipedia, what's a podcast. It's really pretty cool. So we talked about Safari and Chrome. They're your browsers, social media. You can get your on Twitter or Facebook and things like that. One of the nice things about going from a phone or a tablet to social media is you don't pick up as many viruses as you would if you're just using a regular PC, especially a Windows PC. They'll get attacked by the grandpa virus and other pieces of malware and things like that all the time. If you go to social media, so you just have to be a little more careful. We all know what YouTube is. Okay, YouTube is owned by who?
Google.
Google. So it's going to be native on the Android device. It's going to still be installable and usable on the Apple devices. Okay, Siri, Google Assistant. So what is that? That's so you can talk to your device. Okay, and the voice that talks back to you. That's on the Google. On the Apple device is called Siri. Like, Siri, how do I get to the KFC? Oh, let me show you. And she said, you go down the block and you turn left, and then you go down 100 yards, and it gives you a map and a starting point and an ending point. It's really a pretty cool way to do it. Same thing on the Google Assistant. You know, you bring up the Google Assistant, you click the little microphone. It will help you do typing by voice. It will help you get places if you ask for directions and things like that. It's really a cool tool if you're into that. A lot of people I know, though, of our generation, don't like that kind of stuff, and they turn it off. They're just not used to these little boxes talking back to you. So whether you like it or not, the kids are using them all the time. It's still something that's real helpful. I see adults using it all the time. They're talking into their devices, and it really works well. Okay, we talked a little bit about iCloud and Google Drive. It's like having a little USB stick somewhere out on the internet somewhere. You connect to it just like a drive. It doesn't have a drive name like an A drive or B drive or C drive or D drive. It basically has a logical name, and you have to log in with a username and a password. If you don't save your username and password, you're going to be pretty safe. If you have it saved on your device so it can use it automatically every time, well, then you're taking a little bit more of a risk. You're basically changing out a little bit of risk for convenience. So you have to decide how much of each one are you willing to work with. I tend to err on the side of convenience because I'm a little bit lazy. Haven't been bit too bad yet. It happen any day. Probably will, but I'm not, it's probably a bigger chance of getting hit by a car crossing the street. So getting bit by a shark, I guess I'd have to go in the ocean for that.
But you know how to fix it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Most of the time. I'm not always successful. When I'm not successful, I'm what? I'm persistent. I keep on trying and trying and trying. And if I can't do it myself, I get help from somebody. I pay for technical support myself. And it saved me hours and hours and hours, and it was worth it. Okay, so down here we have pages and numbers and Keynote and iTranslate and contacts and calendar. Same thing basically on the other side. Those are just applications. Okay, those are things. What do you think Translate does? It translates from one language to another. It's awesome. I was working with a lady who came from Honduras, and not only from Honduras, she had a special dialect from Honduras, and they had like four different dialects to communicate with her from Honduras. The type of Spanish she spoke in Honduras. So anyway, it allowed us to communicate back and forth. So it's something that is really useful without actually having to learn the language yourself. Okay, now we're going to spend a few minutes on settings. So,
Bruce, I have a question.
yes,
What is slides?
slides is the same as,
Keynote, but what are they?
so they're, so what do we call that in Microsoft Office?
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
Oh, PowerPoint.
Okay, so it's
Slides is,
like PowerPoint.
yeah, PowerPoint.
Presentations.
I see.
You're creating slides to give a presentation. Okay. Keynote, I guess you're the keynote speaker. Okay. Or you're giving a presentation. Pages is your word processing program. Now some people don't like docs, okay? Because it's not Microsoft Word. But I really like it. I use it all the time. So it's just, different strokes for different folks, what you get used to. Settings is probably the most important application, and it is an application that is on your phone, it's on your iPad, it's on your tablet. What would be the equivalent on the Windows machine of settings? Control panel? Control panel. Now they call it settings. So if you hit the start button, it's called settings now. So they caved. They're basically all saying the same thing. But it's basically it's a veneer that sits over a control panel. But what can you do with settings for your device? Well, pretty much anything. So let's pick a device, any device. And go into your device. Now, does everyone know how to get the settings?
And now you slide it down
Yeah, you can slide it down from the top,
and hit the little key.
hit the little gear,
Here,
and that will take you into settings. So, as you can see in settings, you can control things like your connection. What would your connections be? It says right here, Wi-Fi, data usage, airplane mode. Oh, I've got Bluetooth, and
Did you find it?
anyone not find their settings?
Yeah.
Your golden sun.